morning, Namaskar. My name is Surendra Kumar and I am assistant professor in AKGEC Engineering College in Computer Science Department. So my today's topic is exception handling in Java. Basically, this topic is concerning with the Unit 2 of BCS 403 Object-Oriented Programming with Java subject for BTech second year students in 4th semester. So students, in first unit we have learned about introduction of Java and the core Java part. Here we will discuss some special topics of errors during the compilation of the program or during the running time of the program. So if we talk about the exceptions, so what are exceptions basically? Exceptions are those line of codes or those errors which comes at run times which we can't predict. That means exception means which we can't predict but it occurs. So why it occurs we will discuss here in this section. So really if we talk about a program when we run, so it is really to run a program successfully at its very first attempt. That means it is common to make mistakes while developing as well as typing a program. Such mistakes are categorized in different categories like syntax error that comes under the compilation part. Semantic errors leads to the program producing unexpected output. If we talk about the runtime error, that is most often led to abnormal termination of the program. This is the dangerous things for the program. Even sometime a system can crash or you can't find anything in your system, it is crashed. So we have categorized these mistakes in three kinds of categories. First is syntax error, second is semantic error, and third is runtime errors. So here in this topic we basically discussing on a third category, that is runtime errors. So exception handling means exception handling in Java is one of the powerful mechanism to handle the runtime errors so that the normal flow of the application can be maintained. What happens when your program having runtime errors? The program is terminated abnormally and this cause your program failure. So that's why we use here exception handling, so that if there is some error during runtime, then it can be easily handled by the programmer and the next line of code can be executed normally. So exceptions dictionary meaning is basically exception is something abnormal condition, right? So in Java, an exception is an event that disrupt the normal flow of the program. That is, it is an object which throw at runtime. So exception is basically is an object which is thrown at runtime, because everything in OOPS is object. So even exception is also is a one kind of object which is thrown at runtime. So common runtime error are divided by 0. If you dividing a number by 0, for example 12 divided by 0, that is undefined. Or accessing an element that is out of bound an array. For example, if you have an array containing 3 values 2, 3, 5, the size of the array is 1, 3. Size of the array is 3. And if you are accessing an element which is out of bound, that is you are accessing, for example, this is A4. So A4 accessing is not be supported here because your size of the array is 3. So last element which can accessed is A2. But if you go for A3, it will not be accessed. So this is called out of bound of an array. Trying to store incompatible data element. For example, if you are storing a data in integer as a string hello. So this is one kind of exception or runtime error, or using negative values as an array size. So as you know, the array size is always positive. So it is always positive. So if you are accessing an element -1, a -1, so it will give you an error. Trying to convert from string to data to a specify data value, that is converting the same example as here, incompatible data element. That is, you are trying to ABC into integer value, that is not possible. But if you can using int n equals 1, 2, 3, it will be easily converted into integer because it is already a integer number inside the string. But you are converting if ABC, then it will not be converted to n, integer n. So this kind of error also comes under this category. So there are one more kinds of error, that is file errors. That means if you are opening a file in read mode that doesn't exist or no read permission. For example, if you are having a file, a secret file of any organization, and it is not open in for read mode for all other persons, and you are trying to access this file in reading mode, that will give you an exception. Or you can say opening a file in write or update mode, which is has only read only permission. So this kind of errors comes under this category. Next is corrupting memory. That means sometimes your memory is corrupted, or that means the pointer of the location has been terminated or deleted. So at that time you are not able to find out or read the content of that particular memory location. So these are some common runtime errors you are using during this topic. So common scenario of Java, for example, you have one scenario like divide by 0. This is called arithmetic exception. So arithmetic expression, when you are using some calculation, arithmetic calculation, and that is not following the rule of arithmetic calculation, that is divide by 0. So this scenario is called arithmetic exception. Next scenario is null pointer exception. Like if you are using a string and which have null value, and you are trying to find out the length of that string, so this will give you a null point exception because the length of the string is not 0 because it have a null value. Next scenario is number format exception. That means if you are trying to parse a data type into another data type, it will give you such kind of error, number format error. For example, if you are having a string s, that is ABC, and you are trying to pass into integer value, so it will give you a number format exception. As earlier I have given the example of that if it will contain 1, 2, 3, it will easily convert into integer, but here because it is having alphabets, that will not be converted into integer format. Next scenario is array out of bound exceptions. So as earlier I have discussed this exception, if you are having a size of an integer a, array a 5 size, and you are trying to access the value of a10, so that index is not available in this array a, that will give you an array index out of bound exception. So Java exceptions basically handled with these kind of keywords: the Java try catch block, Java nested try block, Java multiple catch blocks, finally block, throw keywords, and different overriding methods also can be used to handle the exception, or you can customize your exceptions also. So we discuss here the Java try block in this exception handling. The try block is basically Java try block is used to enclose the code that might throw an exception. That means try will contain that code that may throw an exception, right? So if you are having the doubt that the code may throw an exception at runtime, then you can enclose that code into the try block, and the Java try block must be followed by either a catch or finally block. So these blocks are basically handle this exception. So you are using here try and the code that may throw an exception, and followed by the catch, that is exception as a class and its reference or object. So and then same if you are using finally, so we will try and finally, right? Next, internal working of try block. If you are having a code block that may have some exception, then object of exception class is thrown. The exception object is thrown here. This exception is handled. If it is handled, not handled, then that will print out the exception description, print the stack trace, and terminate the program abnormally. But if you are handling the exception, that means rest of the code will be executed normally. So this is the benefit of exception handling here. If you are handling it, your code will go easily, next code will go easily run. So JVM firstly check whether the exception is handled or not. So if it is handled, then if exception is not handled, JVM provide the default exception handler that perform the following tasks. First, print out the exception description. Print stack trace, that is hierarchy of method where the exception has occurred. And the third, cause the program to terminate, right? So if you are not handling your exception, these three steps will followed by the JVM. But if the application programmer handles the exception, the normal flow of the exceptions maintained, that is rest of the code is executed. Hierarchy of Java exception classes, basically there are two kinds of exception and hand errors. So throwable interface contain two interfaces, exception and errors, right? So error exception contains IO exceptions, SQL exceptions, class not found exceptions, and runtime exception contains these four: arithmetic exceptions, null pointer exceptions, number format exceptions, and out of bound memory, out of bound, index out of bound exception. That may have first array index out of bound, or दूसरा may have string index out of bound exception. I have given all the example of these kind of exception in previous discussion. There are some errors also, that is stack overflow error, virtual machine error, and out of memory error. So stack overflow, like if you are having a stack and your program memory is full and your stack is overflowed, you are trying to enter more process in this stack, so it will give you the stack overflow message. Types of exceptions, they are categorized in two kinds of checked and unchecked, right? So if we talk about the checked exceptions, so the classes that directly inherit throwable class except runtime exceptions and error are known as checked exceptions. That is IO exceptions, input and output exception, or SQL exceptions are under the category of checked, right? Unchecked, the classes that inherit the runtime exception, known as unchecked exceptions, that are arithmetic exceptions, null pointer extension, array out of bound exceptions, right? And errors are basically out of memory, virtual machines, and assertion errors, which we can't handle here. So we are basically working on these kind of unchecked exceptions here in exception handling. So these are some keywords used in try, catch, finally, throw and throws. If we using the try keyword, that is used to specify the block where we should place an exception code. That means with the code which are going to be having some flaws or that may occur some flaws during the runtime. So it means we can't use try block alone. It must have some other block also. Try block must be followed by either catch or finally, as discussed earlier. What is catch block? Is basically catch block is used to handle the exception. Whatever exceptions are thrown through try block, that is handled here in catch block, it must be proceeded by the try block, which means we can't use catch alone. So it can followed by finally also. So you can use finally after the catch also. That is finally block is used to execute the necessary code of the program. It is executed whether the exception is handled or not. So it is recommended that you always use the finally block, because if your exception handled or not, it will take care of all the things and it will execute the necessary code of your program. Throw is a keyword that is used to throw an exception, and throws is basically keyword used to declare exceptions. You can declare your own exceptions. It is specified that there may occur an exception in the method. It doesn't throw an exception. It is always used with method signature. That means you are creating your own exception handler here. We are going to take an example, like you have a class Java exception example. You are using a try keyword here with this code, that you can see that code have a 0 divided by 0. That means it will definitely raise an exception. It is catched by this catch block, and this is arithmetic exception with E object. That object has to be printed on the screen. If you are catching it, then the rest of the program will run definitely. So rest of the code will run, right? If you are not using without error handling, then what will be done? So you are using a b 0, program will reach here a by b. So क्या होगा कि यहाँ it will throw an exception, but you are not handling this exception. That means the code will not go with this line. That means this kind of error will occur. The program reached this line will not be printed. But in previous code we have printed the rest of the code also after having the same kind of error, but it is handled. That's why the next code is executed. But here it is not handled. That's why the next code will not be executed here. So traditional way of handling the errors are basically if block. If we are using if block, so if b is not equal to 0, it will print, otherwise it will not print, right? It will be b is 0 and go for next code. So this is traditional way of using handling the errors, but it is recommended that you should use exception handler, because Java is providing a broad class, broad interface for exception handling, that is in the two form, that is exception and errors form. So error handling is basically any program can find itself in usual circumstances, that is called error condition. So a good program should be able to handle these conditions gracefully. So Java provides a mechanism to handle these errors, that is called exceptions. I hope you understand the exception very easily manner, right? So exception and their handling which is done with the JVM, right? So these exception I have discussed here in your discussion, right? So these are the three keywords, four keywords basically: try, catch, finally, and throws and throw. There are 5 keywords used in this exception handling. So this is a diagrammatical way how to exception handling mechanism works. That is try block statement that cause an exception, that will forward the exception, throw an exception, and it is giving the handing over to the catch block, and the next statement has to be executed. So this is the syntax of the exception handling code. Try, then statement which going to be cause an error, and next is your catch block with exception, type of exception, and you can use finally here also, because if you are not handling some kind of exception here, that will use with this kind of finally block. So this is a simple program to which we can use exception handling, right? So the sample run of the program, here you will find out the number of input 1 and 2, that will be number of argument is 0, argument is 2, and the sum is 3. So here if you are using ABC, so it will give you valid argument 1, 2 and 3. So there are 3 arguments. The sum of the argument is 3 only, and valid argument is 2 and invalid is 1. So multiple catch statement can be used here for one kind of exception. For second kind of exception, you can use multiple catch also, or you can use finally block also if number of exceptions are not handled, right? So this is throw the exception. So you are having a program with the throw E. You are going to throw E here. That E is to be thrown. So this is the program output with, this is without throw, this is with throw, right? So with throw, without throw, it will give you this error. With throw, without throw, it will give you this kind of output. So with exception handling, already discussed the program. With throw and final statement both. So thank you so much. We will discuss in next class for further in the detail of the next topic. Thank you so much.